When a heart finally reaches the end of its own strength, something divine begins to move. There is a holy quietness that comes when a person stops fighting in their own power and lets God take the lead. Peace is not the reward of control, it is the miracle of surrender. It is born the moment you unclench your hands and say, Lord, I trust you more than I trust myself. And as you walk deeper into this surrender, you discover something surprising. The things you once feared begin to lose their power. The voices that tormented your mind grow quieter. The insecurities that held you hostage begin to wither. Because when the heart yields fully to God, the enemy loses his grip. Surrender is not the end of your strength. It is the beginning of God's strength flowing through you. It is the place where heaven partners with your weakness and turns it into supernatural confidence. So many people spend their lives wrestling with inner storms, holding on tightly to pride, plans, habits, and worries because they think letting go means losing control. But in truth, holding on is what keeps you trapped. Letting go is what sets you free. When you release what is in your hands, God releases what is in His. And what He has is always greater. Greater peace, greater wisdom, greater favor, greater purpose. He waits patiently for you to loosen your grip, because He will never force His peace into a heart that refuses to surrender. Peace is a gift, but surrender is the key that opens the door. As you surrender more, your spiritual vision becomes clearer. You begin to notice God's fingerprints on things you once thought were random. You begin to see His guiding hand in places where you once thought you were alone. You begin to sense His voice whispering direction, when before you only heard confusion. Surrender sharpens your discernment. It lifts the fog from your thoughts. It brings stillness to your spirit so you can finally hear God's gentle instructions. When your soul quiets, heaven speaks. Sometimes surrender feels like stepping into the unknown, but it is actually stepping into divine certainty. Because God cannot fail. And when you place your life in His hands, you place it in the safest, strongest, most loving hands that exist. You may not know what tomorrow holds, but surrender allows you to walk into tomorrow with peace instead of fear, with expectation instead of anxiety. You begin to trust that whatever comes, God will give you the strength to handle it, the wisdom to navigate it, and the grace to overcome it. This peace that follows surrender begins to cover every part of your life like a healing balm. It touches your mind, easing the tension that used to live there. It touches your emotions, calming storms that used to rage uncontrollably. It touches your body, lifting burdens that used to make you feel exhausted and heavy. It touches your relationships, softening hardened hearts and restoring broken places. It touches your decisions, guiding you toward doors God has opened and away from doors God has closed. Peace becomes a companion, a counselor, a guard over your heart. As this peace grows, you find yourself changing in ways you never expected. You respond differently to challenges. You don't panic the way you once did. You don't cling to things that don't matter. You don't rush ahead of God trying to force outcomes. Instead, you begin to move with Him, breathe with Him, walk with Him. Life becomes less of a struggle and more of a partnership. You no longer feel like you're pushing your way through the world. You feel carried by a greater strength, guided by a greater wisdom. There will still be battles, but you will fight them from a place of rest. And there will still be storms, but you will stand in them with a calm spirit. There will still be moments of uncertainty, but you will not be shaken. Because surrender doesn't remove the challenges, it removes the fear from the challenges. It fills your heart with the assurance that you are not alone, not abandoned, not forgotten. God is with you, and His presence becomes your peace. In this surrendered life, prayer becomes more powerful. Not because you use the right words, but because your heart is open. God responds to surrendered hearts faster than He responds to long speeches. When you pray from a place of surrender, heaven moves. When you ask God for direction with a surrendered spirit, clarity comes. When you confess your weakness with a surrendered heart, His strength flows in like a flood. Prayer becomes less of you trying to convince God to help, and more of God revealing what He already prepared for you. And then something extraordinary begins to happen. You start to experience peace even before the answer comes. You feel calm even before the situation changes. You feel steady even when things are uncertain. This is the miracle of surrender. It gives you peace in advance. You don't have to wait for the breakthrough to feel safe. You don't have to wait for the miracle to feel hopeful. You don't have to wait for the change to feel rested. You begin to live in the peace of what God is about to do, not just in the peace of what He has already done. Peace becomes the atmosphere of your life. People around you begin to notice it. They sense something different in the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you face difficulty. They see that your strength doesn't come from human confidence, but from divine surrender. Your peace becomes a testimony, a living declaration that God is faithful. That trust in Him brings rest. That surrender is not the end of power, but the doorway to it. And every day, as you surrender again and again, His peace deepens. It becomes rooted in you. It becomes your foundation. It becomes the place where your faith grows, your character strengthens, your spirit matures. You stop living from worry and start living from worship. You stop living from fear and start living from faith. You stop living from pressure and start living from presence. This is the beauty of surrender. It transforms the entire landscape of your heart. It turns chaos into calm, fear into confidence, striving into stillness. It opens your life to God's perfect peace, a peace that no enemy can steal and no circumstance can break. And the deeper you surrender, the deeper that peace becomes, flowing like a river, steady, unstoppable, unshakable. And as this river of peace continues to flow, you begin to recognize how beautifully God works in surrendered lives. You start noticing that the situations which once overwhelmed you now feel lighter, not because they disappeared, but because you are no longer carrying them alone. There is a heavenly partnership taking place. God walks into the rooms of your life that you once tried to clean, fix, and manage by yourself. And where your strength ends, His strength begins. Where your understanding fails, His wisdom unfolds. Where your patience thins, His grace steps in. This is the quiet miracle happening behind every surrendered heart. God begins to take over the battles you once believed you had to fight on your own. In surrender, you also learn the sacred art of waiting. Not the restless waiting that drains your soul, but the peaceful waiting that trusts God's timing more than your own urgency. You begin to understand that every delay has purpose, every pause carries wisdom, and every closed door protects you from something unseen. You start to realize that God's timing is never late. He is slow only to those who try to rush life, but He is perfect to those who walk in surrender. And in this surrendered waiting, your faith grows stronger. You stop measuring time by your needs and start measuring it by His faithfulness. As the transformation deepens, you notice something else happening inside you. Surrender begins to cure the restless chase for human approval. You no longer feel the need to please everyone, impress everyone, or prove anything. You stop seeking validation in the eyes of people who never gave you peace in the first place. You begin to understand that true peace comes only from God's approval, not the applause of the crowd. And when your heart is anchored in God's acceptance, the opinions of others lose power. Their praise won't inflate you, and their criticism won't crush you. Surrender liberates you from the emotional roller coasters of comparison, insecurity, and fear of judgment. Your mind also begins to heal. Thoughts that used to spiral out of control begin to settle. You no longer entertain every fear-filled scenario the enemy tries to plant. Instead, your thoughts find rest in God's promises. You discover the power of inner stillness. You learn to say, "Lord, I surrender this thought to you," and peace rushes in to guard your mind. Slowly, the mental chaos that once sabotaged your days and nights loses its authority. You replace panic with prayer, fear with faith, confusion with trust. Your mind becomes a garden where peace grows instead of a battlefield where worry reigns. And because your mind is at peace, your decisions become clearer. You no longer rush into things simply to escape discomfort. You no longer cling to what God is trying to remove. You no longer delay obedience because of uncertainty. Instead, your surrendered heart allows God to lead step by step. You sense His nudges more clearly, you recognize His warnings sooner, and you follow His voice with more confidence. Surrender sharpens your spiritual sensitivity, helping you distinguish His whisper from the noise of the world. Relationships also begin to transform under the power of surrender. You start releasing grudges that poisoned your peace. You stop carrying old wounds that drained your joy. You forgive not because the other person deserved forgiveness, but because your heart deserves freedom. You surrender your right to hold on to bitterness, and in doing so, God restores peace where there was once tension. You begin to love with a healed spirit, speak with a calmer tone, and respond with gentler wisdom. Surrender softens your heart without weakening your boundaries. It teaches you how to love people without losing yourself and how to let go of people without losing your peace. As you continue to walk this surrendered journey, you realize that peace becomes your greatest strength in spiritual battles. When the enemy attempts to intimidate you, he finds a heart anchored in God. When anxiety tries to return, it finds a soul that refuses to be shaken. When fear tries to whisper lies, it finds a mind that has learned to rest in truth. Peace becomes your shield, an invisible armor no darkness can penetrate. And because you carry this peace, you walk into every situation with quiet confidence and knowing that God is already working behind the scenes. Then you begin to notice that blessings flow more easily in surrender. Doors open naturally. Opportunities find you instead of you chasing them. Breakthroughs come at the perfect moment. This is not because you stopped working, but because you stopped striving. When your heart is surrendered, you move in God's rhythm, not in human pressure. You work with grace, walk with clarity, and wait with expectancy. You stop forcing outcomes and start flowing with divine alignment. And in this alignment, life begins to feel lighter, more meaningful, more guided. Even challenges take on a new meaning. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" your surrendered heart begins to ask, "Lord, what are you teaching me through this?" Instead of resisting difficulties, you grow through them. You no longer see obstacles as threats, but as invitations to deeper dependence. Problems don't break you, they refine you. Surrender gives you spiritual resilience, the kind that thrives under pressure, because it knows that God is in control even when circumstances seem out of control. And as your inner world transforms, your outer world follows. You begin to carry peace into your home, your workplace, your conversations, your decisions. People feel safe around you because your presence is calm, rooted, centered. Your words carry weight because they come from a surrendered spirit. Your life becomes a quiet sermon, preaching without a microphone, witnessing without force, shining without effort. The peace you carry becomes a ministry, reaching hearts without you even realizing it. In this journey of surrender, you discover that peace is not just an emotion. It is a lifestyle, a spiritual posture, a sacred way of walking with God. It is the atmosphere of heaven brought down into your everyday life. And the more you surrender, the more this peace deepens, expands, and strengthens within you, shaping the person you are becoming and preparing you for everything God has destined you to walk into. And as this peace deepens layer by layer, you start to discover that surrender is not a moment of weakness, but a continuous unfolding of strength inside you. Every time you choose to release what burdens you, a new dimension of calm rises within your spirit. You realize that the more you surrender, the less the world can shake you. Circumstances that once caused your heart to tremble no longer have that power. Voices that once discouraged you now sound faint. Situations that once stole your sleep lose their ability to control your nights. Because surrender builds a fortress of peace around your heart that no anxiety can climb, no fear can break, and no darkness can penetrate. This transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens each time you whisper, "Lord, take this," and place your worries into His hands instead of carrying them alone. You begin to trust that God knows what you cannot see. He knows the turns ahead, the storms approaching, the battles forming, and the victories He has already prepared for you. When you surrender, you are not giving up. You are giving God permission to lead. You are choosing divine wisdom over human pressure, divine timing over human rush, divine peace over human striving. As you continue this journey, you notice how your reactions start to change. Where you once responded with frustration, you now respond with patience. Where you once reacted in fear, you now react in quiet faith. Where you once panicked, you now pause long enough to hear the whisper of God calming your heart. Surrender rewires the way you navigate life. It shifts your heart from survival mode to spiritual flow. You stop living with clenched fists and start living with open hands, trusting that whatever God places in your life has purpose and whatever He removes has protection. This shift also brings a new level of spiritual clarity. Confusion that once clouded your mind begins to lift. You no longer feel torn between 1,000 thoughts, because surrender teaches you to listen for God's voice above all others. You begin to recognize His gentle nudges, His quiet warnings, His subtle encouragements. You start sensing peace as your compass. If something doesn't carry peace, you know it isn't from God. If something disturbs the calm of your spirit, you learn to pause and wait rather than force your way forward. Surrender teaches you to move at the pace of grace, not the pace of anxiety. Even in the midst of uncertainty, you notice that peace becomes your anchor. Circumstances may shift, but your heart does not. Challenges may arise, but your spirit remains steady. Life may take unexpected turns, but the peace that God places inside a surrendered heart is not easily shaken. You learn that peace is not connected to what is happening around you. It is connected to what is happening within you. And what is happening within you is being shaped by the one who never changes. As your trust in God grows deeper, you also begin to release the fear of the future. You stop imagining worst-case scenarios. You stop worrying about what tomorrow might bring. Instead, you focus on the truth that God is already in your tomorrow, preparing everything you need. Surrender shifts your focus from fear of what could go wrong to expectation of what God will make right. You no longer dread the future. You anticipate it. You walk into each new day with the confidence that God goes before you, walks with you, and carries you when you feel weak. This surrendered peace begins to influence every area of your life. You start seeing breakthroughs that had been delayed finally moving. You find solutions to problems that once seemed impossible. You experience healing in areas you thought would remain broken. You start noticing opportunities that you were once too stressed to see. When your heart is surrendered, you become aligned with the flow of God's purpose. You become sensitive to doors He opens and wise about doors He closes. You stop fighting for things that were never meant for you and start embracing the things that are aligned with your calling. You also become more aware of how God has been protecting you, even in moments you didn't understand. You look back and see that the things you once cried about were the very things God used to guide you. The delays protected you. The disappointments redirected you. The losses strengthened you. Surrender gives you the spiritual vision to recognize that God has been working all along, not only in the miracles you noticed, but also in the moments you overlooked. And as this peace takes root, gratitude begins to grow in your spirit. You start thanking God for things you used to ignore. You appreciate small blessings, quiet moments, gentle reminders. Your heart becomes soft, receptive, open. You realize that peace is not built through big miracles alone, but through daily surrender, daily trust, daily letting go. Gratitude becomes a natural language of a surrendered heart, and thanksgiving becomes the rhythm of your days. Surrender also teaches you how to battle in a new way. Instead of fighting with fear, you fight with faith. Instead of wrestling with anxiety, you stand in peace. Instead of trying to control outcomes, you pray with confidence and wait with expectation. Your battles no longer drain you the way they used to, because now you understand that you are not fighting alone. God is fighting for you, through you, and ahead of you. Peace becomes your strategy. Rest becomes your weapon. Stillness becomes your strength. As this transformation continues, your confidence in God grows unshakable. You begin to walk with a quiet boldness, a boldness that doesn't come from arrogance, but from deep trust. You speak with authority because your spirit is grounded in truth. You walk with courage because your heart is anchored in peace. You face life with calm determination because you know the one who holds your life holds all power in his hands. And as you surrender more, your identity becomes clearer. You no longer see yourself through the lens of fear, failure, or limitation. You see yourself through God's eyes, chosen, called, protected, strengthened, and deeply loved. Surrender reveals who you truly are, not the version distorted by stress and worry, but the version shaped by God's peace and presence. With every passing day, you experience the beauty of this truth. Peace begins where surrender begins. The more you yield, the more you receive. The more you release, the more you rise. The more you let go, the more God fills your life with the kind of peace that cannot be shaken, cannot be stolen, and cannot be explained, only experienced. When every word has been spoken and every truth has been unfolded, the message stands unshaken. Peace is not something we chase. Peace is something we unlock through surrender. The deepest rest your soul will ever know comes the moment you stop fighting God and start trusting Him. When you release your grip, heaven takes hold. When you let go of what you cannot control, God fills your life with what you were always meant to carry. His strength, His clarity, His presence, His unshakable peace. So walk forward with this truth burning in your heart, the life you desire, the calm you long for, the breakthrough you pray for. They all begin at the altar of surrender. Let God lead, and you will discover a peace so powerful that nothing on earth can break it.